Thank you very much. I've got to say, it's quite odd being on this side of proceedings. I've always wondered what was behind these. Turns out not that interesting. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. But thank you very much for the introduction. That's covered 90% of my speech, so might waffle a little bit. But you know, good morning, everybody. First off, massive congratulations to all the prize winners. Very, very happy to see a lot of Wolves up there. Well done to you. Yeah, let's go for that. Yeah. And a big thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you this morning. I do remember being in this tent year on year, fighting for that little bit of relief when the fan just swung around, so I wasn't sweating as much. But you guys seem to have upped your games, as I can see some pretty industrial strength air conditioners down there, so fair play. For those of you that don't know me, and I mean you do now because we've introduced me, but I'm Ethan. I was at Wellingborough from 2003 to 2010 and was in Wolves and Parker Staines. I now play professional rugby for Worcester Warriors, and I used to play for Northampton Saints, so let's leave that there. Last summer, Howard Barnhurst spoke to you. He's a very good friend of mine, and without a doubt, one of the most remarkable people that I know. I followed the speech on Facebook Live, and as those of you that were here will know, it was absolutely fantastic. He was the one that actually motivated me to start this business inadvertently, but I will be sending him the bill. It's a very tough act to follow, but I do love a challenge. Unfortunately, my skill set mostly involves running into people and eating what the National Health Service classifies as a distressing amount of food, which offers very little in the way of assistance in writing a speech, so do bear with me. I suppose stage one of writing this speech was to find a subject. I thought about doing an autobiography, but then that's a little bit self-indulgent. I thought about doing a behind the scenes of what goes on in rugby, but that's far too inappropriate. Maybe a fable, maybe a collection of my favourite parts of school. All were options, but my final decision was I never made a final decision. So therefore, what I'm going to do instead is just share some of my experiences with you that I think moulded the masquerading pro athlete you see in front of you today. A story of following your passions and getting out of your comfort zone. Well, seeing as we're all at Wellingborough, I suppose I should really start here, shouldn't I? I was quite a heavy-set child, to put it nicely. So when I first joined the school in 2003, I'd barely seen the outdoors. The closest I'd come to sport was probably FIFA World Cup on PlayStation 2. So you can imagine my utter excitement when I saw on my timetable a 2-hour slot for games. I thought, brilliant. Bit of FIFA, bit of Call of Duty, I suppose it'd be Fortnite these days. 2 hours just having a laugh, this place is brilliant. That emotion quickly changed to sheer horror when I realised it meant physical exercise. Not only that, but rugby. I had no idea what rugby was. There was no video game for that, like hand egg. I didn't have a clue what it was. But fast forward to that first game session, I was in my element. I'd finally found something where my size was an advantage, and it was the first sport I was actually good at. So the wheels are in motion thanks to the first instance of me stepping out of my comfort zone, albeit not by choice, but stepping out nonetheless. But despite developing this love for rugby, at no point did I ever think it was a viable career choice for me. I didn't know anyone that had been in professional sport. I wasn't even a kid that particularly enjoyed exercise, so my focus was fully on school. Up until I reached the under-15s with the late but legendary Mr. Ramsden. And I pause on this particular moment in my life because playing rugby under Mr. Ramsden was equal parts some of my proudest rugby memories and my most terrifying. This giant Yorkshire man oozed respect and was the first person to suggest that I could make something more than just a hobby out of rugby. Not necessarily the most technical coach in the world, but the morals of the game that he instilled in me, the Herculean team talks he used to give, I still think about before every single professional game I play now. So he was really the one that fully lit that fire. Anyway, we'll fast forward. 17 years old, final year of school. The plan was made, my 3 unis were all chosen. The offers were made, just had the exams to go, just had to get the grades. And I'm sat there revising, and I get a phone call from the Northampton Saints Academy. They say, one of our wingers has gone down, and there's a sevens tournament coming up, we'd like you to play. For those of you that are unaware, sevens is like normal rugby, on the same size pitch, but with just 7 people. So speed and fitness are preferable, which made me wonder why I wasn't chosen in the first place. But you know, my instant response was yes. I went, I played, and I did reasonably well for a big lad. At the end of the tournament, I spoke to the academy coach, who asked me what my plans for the next year were. I said, I've got opportunities at unis X and Y and so on and so forth, but I was abruptly cut off as he offered me the chance to come and do pre-season with the senior squad. And I will level with you, I was terrified. I spoke to my parents, my brother about it, and they were all in the same mindset. Go and do pre-season. If you don't like it, you can leave when university starts. Take it as a gap year. So I apprehensively agreed, but I should mention, my brother was already at Northampton Saints at this point, and once my mum had left the room from this chat, I just saw this dastardly grin on his face, as if my nerves weren't bad enough. And I asked him what that sketchy smile was about, and his response was, no matter what happens in pre-season, just do not stop, and then left the room giggling. So that helped my inner turmoil, as older brothers do. And people often ask me why I was scared and not excited about this wonderful opportunity. And when I think about it, I'd worked the best part of my entire life to get me to university. You know, it was the path that I was supposed to do. I planned where to go. I planned to get a degree and then get a job. And doing pre-season would be me, this walking pork scratching, going and training with one of the best teams in Premiership rugby. And if I'm honest with you, I felt like I was nowhere near good enough. I felt a little bit like a fraud, because school rugby is one thing, but was I really good enough to be professional? I certainly didn't think so. However, I had a moment of epiphany that this situation was entirely up to me. The decision was my own, and no one was forcing me to do it. So this jump out of my comfort zone was entirely my own doing. It would also turn out to be the best decision I could have ever possibly made. It was a pretty harsh introduction to the professional side of things. It was a 7 a.m. meeting, which I felt was brutal. And then we went straight to the gym, where we were tested on how strong we were, upper body, lower body, so eased into the day somewhat. But then we moved on to our first fitness session, and that was a bit of a different story. Within 10 minutes of the session, I was quite literally crawling along the floor, trying to keep up. The head of the fitness at the time was ex-military, so a little bit unforgiving if you weren't up to standard. I had him approximately this close to my face, shouting nothing but abuse at me. So I was very willing to throw in the towel. I mean, the fatigue, I can't explain to you. Well, I mean, I'll try, but my legs kept giving way. It felt like I was running on a couple of marshmallows. My arms were completely obsolete. My lungs, good lord, my lungs. Have you ever been winded? I assume everyone here has been winded at some point. You know how that goes away? Didn't go away. Yeah, so finally, my sight had also become considerably less functional. I could probably see about that much out of everything. But my mind was working surprisingly well. So when I got past the internal screaming, I remembered why I decided to do pre-season in the first place. I wanted to be challenged. I'd been given this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I wanted to pursue it as far as I possibly could, and turn this passion for rugby into my future. Luckily, my brother's words and not the giggles came back to mind, and in my head, the only thing that got me through the session was just a constant repeat of "do not stop." I finished the session, not quickly, but I finished it. And when my regular motor function had actually returned, the head of fitness came and spoke to me and commended my attitude. It was hard to commend anything else. And from then on, the abuse turned into encouragement. The sessions got easier, I got fitter, and the whole experience actually became progressively more enjoyable. I learned what I think was the most valuable lesson of my career that day, which I think is applicable to every walk of life. And that was that you can be the most talented in your field, be that in sport, studies, whatever it is, but if your attitude isn't right, you're never going to progress. You may get somewhere, sure, but there will come a point where you hit a plateau, and at this point you have a choice. You either go, right, this is as far as I'm going to go, I gave it a good crack, let's sit here, or you do not stop. The only thing limiting you in achieving what you want, I'm a firm believer, is your attitude. Prime example being, I started on trial in that academy with 12 other extremely talented players, and of that crop of 12, there's only 2 of us that are now still playing Premiership rugby. So that was the academy experience. That was a laugh. Fast forward nearly 7 years, and I'd had a decent run with Northampton Saints, as I've already alluded to. Had the Aviva Premiership, Challenge Cup, A-League. I received Young Player of the year we won the Premiership. It wasn't a bad go, but I felt personally like I could go further. I think I'd only started 12 of my 95 games for Northampton, and that was a massive frustration for me. It wasn't really what I played rugby for. I'd hit a plateau and it was becoming more and more obvious to me. I was out of contract that year and had a decision to make. I could either sit on the bench here, which is a Premiership club, it's my hometown, it's a club I'd always dreamed of playing for, or move clubs, leave my hometown, my family, my friends, this team that I'd been looking up to since I was your age. And I was approached by the Worcester Warriors to play for them for the next few years, and they wanted the deal done fairly quickly, so the pressure was on. It was quite a rushed decision, but one that I don't regret in the slightest. I'd never known anything other than Northamptonshire. Fun fact that I found out the other day, my dad tells me, he's probably lying, but I'll go with it anyway. I am the first Waller to leave Northamptonshire in 500 years. So. But I'd never know if the grass was greener unless I left. So I signed. I signed for the Worcester Warriors. No longer a saint, but a warrior. And I got flat on my own. And for the first couple of months before I started pre-season and I hadn't met anyone, I was quite literally just by myself. But it didn't bother me. I was scared, I was apprehensive, don't get me wrong, but the excitement of what could be in that year massively outweighed those other emotions. A fresh start and then clean slate, an opportunity to show the best of my ability and show what it takes to succeed. As it so happens, the last season happened to be one of, if not the most enjoyable seasons of rugby I've ever played. I mean, we didn't win any trophies or get to any finals or anything like that, but I finally got the opportunity to perform at Premiership level week in, week out. I made a decent account of myself, and I think I only missed one Premiership game last year, which is probably why I can't lift either of my shoulders above my head. But I also met a new group of fantastic people on and off the pitch at Worcester, and I can't wait to build on that again this year. Now, the trap with rugby is that it can really engulf you, especially if it's sport, and I imagine it's probably the same for all professional sport. It turns into your day-to-day life and something you have to think about when you wake up, in terms of, you're analysing teams over lunch and dinner, you're being careful what you eat, when you sleep, if you go for a drink with your friends, the possibility to having to move all over the country every couple of years when your contract's out. And it's almost impossible to plan things because the days off are ridiculously planned. TV companies can essentially just change the game whenever they like, so if you've got something planned, my girlfriend hates it, absolutely hates it. But anyway, I've lost my place because I waffled on. There we go. One thing I always said to myself was that although rugby is going to be a massive part of my life, I can't let it define me as a person. I can't let that be all that I am. Of course it's going to be substantial, but that initial self-doubt, I think, when going professional and being on trial meant that I put a considerable amount of time into everything else I could have outside of rugby as well, just in case, the inevitable did happen and someone didn't offer me a contract. So something I put a lot of time into is giving something back. During my time at Northampton, we had a lot of worthy charities that would come in on a team run day, come and sit and have lunch with us, or just come and watch training, ask for a signed shirt or a picture, some memorabilia, something of that nature. And having been to some of the charity events that these people have held, I knew that I wanted to do whatever I could whilst in the rugby world to help raise money. Now, I'm under no illusions, don't get me wrong. I know I'm not an international rugby player, I know I'm no sort of celebrity, but I was friends with the international rugby players. Some of them you could probably class as celebrities. So I decided that we'd use that as much as we could to try and draw some money in and help out some local worthy causes. I became an ambassador for a local charity called Alfie Bear's Journey, which is a charity that raises awareness for DIPG, which is diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, which is a bile cancer that affects children under the age of 9, but I won't go into that too specifically. You can look them up, alfiebearsjourney.com. I met the family that started the charity and was hugely touched by their story. And it really kick-started my desire to want to help these people. So I went on to do some large-scale charity events in Northampton, which include writing 2 Christmas pantomimes and doing 1 Summer Family Fun Day, which, as we've already mentioned, raised over £12,000 over those 3 events. And although very stressful at times, I'd happily do it over again in a heartbeat if it meant seeing the smiles on those faces again. I realised that it's quite toasty in here, so don't worry, we are nearing the end. But honestly, I've got to say a massive thank you to this school, which I really haven't had a chance to since I left. Without moving here, chances are I'd be in a very, very different place than now. I'd probably still be on my sofa playing FIFA World Cup. Well, that's a definite. I mean, I never would have discovered rugby, but more importantly, I wouldn't have had the courage to do any of the things I mentioned today without the friendships that I made whilst I was here. Let's start with this speech, for example. Howard Barnhurst was actually one of the ones that got me to come here and do this today, so you can blame him for any boredom you're currently experiencing. I wouldn't have fallen in love with rugby the way I did had I not been encouraged to join the local rugby clubs by my friends Will, Dan and Josh, of which they made the experience all the more enjoyable. And whenever I see them these days, we still reminisce about those times playing rugby at the local rugby club. And when I moved to Worcester, I had two very close friends only a stone's throw away in Cheltenham, who I would visit whenever I was homesick, which is a little bit more often than I care to admit. And more recently, I had 12 friends, all from Wellingborough, who came up to watch a game in Worcester with all their partners, and we stayed up into the early hours talking about various memories that we made here whilst at school. And I think my friendships here are one of the most powerful constants in this rollercoaster ride that has been my career so far. And I encourage you all to enjoy every single moment you have with each other day to day, as when you get older they do get few and far between. I mean, they do get more fun, but they get few and far between. And I guess really that draws us to a close. But before I go, I'll leave you with one piece of advice. I think as human beings generally, we're naturally wired to stay as comfortable as possible. But you can never really find out how far you can go or what talents are really buried inside you unless you give everything a darn good go. And if it scares you, do it. Except for talking to strangers or jumping off cliffs, because that's not smart in anyone's book. Thank you.
Ethan, thank you very much indeed for that excellent speech. It now gives me great pleasure to ask Matthew and Maddie to step forward and respond on behalf of the school.
Good morning everyone. Today we would just like to share with you our memories and highlights of the prep school. But before we do, I would just like to thank Mr. Waller and Mrs. Knox on behalf of the prep school for their very entertaining speeches. It only feels like yesterday that I was frightened yet excited to move to this school in Year 7. Life is like a roller coaster. It has its ups and downs, but it is your choice to scream or enjoy the ride. We found this quote about a roller coaster and thought that it could be applied to the school as well. The new Year 4s who join the prep school every year hop on board nervous and excited about the ride ahead, whereas after the exams, the Year 8s coast gently towards the station at the end of this line. This year's roller coaster has been thrilling fun, with so many achievements made by all students. Sports coaches help us improve our skills, like the roller coaster cars being pulled up on a chain. We reached the top of our climb when we had great hockey successes at the start of the year. The under-13 girls hockey squad, who qualified for the IAPS regional event, were the first Wellingborough school team to reach the finals in 8 years. The under-11 girls hockey squad also did well to reach the quarter-finals in their tournament.
For the Year 8 boys in the rugby season, the under-13As played 12 games. They won 8, lost 3 and drew 1. So overall it was a very successful season with more thrills than spills. The under-13As also took part in the Rugby Sevens tournament, in which they came third, which was a brilliant effort.
The poetry recitation competition was a huge success. Well done to all the pupils who participated. You performed Paradise Lost with Vignesh, didn't you? The performances were incredible.
On a roller coaster ride, everyone can purchase hideous photographs of themselves and their friends enduring the effects of G-Force. At the prep school, we buy the Christmas Disco DVD. As usual, the event was a huge success. Everybody really enjoyed taking photos in preposterous costumes in the photo booth, and the tuck shop, as always, sold out.
There are sad days when old, enjoyable roller coaster rides close before new ones are constructed. Just before the holidays, we said farewell to Mr. and Mrs. Bow. Next, we enjoyed numerous thrilling descents. During the holidays, many pupils went on the school ski trip to Austria, where they whizzed down the slopes just before we welcomed Mr. Holman to the school after a